You're listening to the Rite Retirement Show.
The 70% of people out there listening to the show today are going to need some level of care. It doesn't necessarily mean that 70% are going to end up in a nursing home, but 70% of people will need some assistance out there. The biggest fear is running out of money for the retiree, but what we see is not enough people spend enough of their money.
Cris prides himself in what matters to you. This is the Rite Retirement Show.
Hi there, welcome to our show today. I'm Lou Ann Fulmer, joined by certified financial planner and an amazing financial advisor from WG Financial Group, Graham Bauer. He's here today to help you plan smarter and retire stronger. So as we get started, if you have questions, you can call or text the word visit, set up your own complimentary discovery session. Here's the number to call or text the word visit, 256-937-2010. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook throughout the week, and we are available wherever you get your podcast. Spotify, Apple, wherever you get us. Just look for the Rite Retirement Show. Graham, I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, great to be with you as well, Luann. How are you doing?
Just doing great. My son-in-law is home from the Middle East.
That's amazing. What day did he get home again? Was it last
Thursday,
week or was it this week?
Just this last Thursday. So hasn't even been home a whole week, and our lives are back to normal. Everything's back to, being how it should be. Daddy's home. My daughter's husband's home. So we know he's safe here. We can physically see him. Yeah. So we are so thankful. So thankful.
No, that's great. That is a huge praise that he's home safe. Mm-hmm. And did you guys do anything to celebrate the day he got back?
We
or was
did.
He just
it was kind of one of those emotional days, where we went out there to the base. The whole entire 190th came home. So that was lucky. The whole base, who had been actually 40% of all of the flights and everything and the refueling were done by this group of men and women. So them to get to come home was amazing, right as everything was kind of starting up again. So we were very frightened that they wouldn't be able to make it home all the way, but they did. And so it was just such an emotional day, and it was so exciting. Got to watch them fly in, and I would say hundreds of people were out at the base welcoming their loved ones home. So happy to have them all home safe again, because they were at a base that was hit very hard. And so it was so scary. So just knowing that they're home right now and safe, we're so excited. Yeah, my daughter's so excited.
You can take a deep breath a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Finally. Yes. And, the little grandkids, it's so cute to watch them, look at their daddy again. He'd been gone seemed like 6 months, but it was 4 months, but it seemed like an eternity.
Still a long time though. Yeah, that's still a really long time. I know Emma's uncle, he served in the military, and he did a couple longer tours, and she always talks about the fact that on one of them he was gone so long that she was kind of like a little scared of him when he got back at first. Because when you're a little kid, you're like 3 years old. 6 months is a long time in your life, or 8 months is a long time. It's like, oh, who is this person when they come back? So, but I'm super glad to hear that he made it back safe. And like I said, I know that's just got to be a huge relief for everybody.
Huge relief. Prayers answered. He is safe, and his brother too. His brother only had to go over for a couple of weeks, but he's back too. So. Anyway, right now, all is good. We'll see what happens, with everything going on over there in the future. But let's go ahead and get into what we want to talk about today. First of all, I got to ask you, you want to do any type of a market update?
Yeah, I'll do a kind of a quick market update this week, because we had some interesting stuff happen actually today. So for one thing, the CPI report came out, the Consumer Price Index, which is kind of our inflation report. And this has definitely been a big last couple of months for this report, because it's been a little bit worse than it has in the past few years, especially with the conflict in the Middle East and with oil prices and everything like that. So this month, the Consumer Price Index came down a little bit. The CPI report, it came down to about 3.5% was the total CPI, and it had been expected to come in at around 3.8%. So it came in a little bit under expectations, which the market has really, really liked. If you look at core inflation, which excludes food and energy, because as we know, all of us know, food and energy prices are very volatile.
Yeah.
It's at about 2.6%, which is also about 30 basis points under where it was expected to be. So that is good news. A lot of that has to do with oil prices coming down a little bit and having some relief there. And the market's up a pretty good bit today in reaction to that. That's been a big number to watch because, and Kevin Warsh actually today, chairman of the Federal Reserve, made even more comments on this. It has been increasingly looking likely that there'd be some interest rate increases, where at the beginning of the year, we were maybe talking about cuts at this point in time.
Mm.
But an interesting thing with this data, so July 29th is the next Fed meeting when they'll get together. And previous to today, there was literally yesterday, the futures of expectations of what would happen there. It was basically 60-40, 60% chance that they would hold rates, 40% chance that they would raise rates. After this report came out today, it jumped to an 83% chance that they will keep rates where they are and a 16% chance that they will raise
Oh.
rates. So this data swung the numbers pretty wildly, basically overnight, because of the fact that the expectation is maybe inflation is cooling a little bit, and maybe that'll lead the feds to either not raise rates at all, or at least not raise them in the next few weeks. So I think that that is something to be watching, and you're going to see the markets move, at least on the daily scale, a decent bit based off of CPI right now because of everything else that it kind of affects.
Right. Okay. Well, good, I guess. A little bit of a surprise there. Do you have anything for a federal minute?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to bring up on the federal side of things as well, and I think this kind of ties into this as well. Recently, we've run into an increasing number of federal employees that, again, and we saw this a few years ago, but it had been a couple of years since I'd seen it consistently, have been moving a lot of their money just into the G fund. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there has been a bit more uncertainty in the markets these last few months. I think some people feel like prices are inflated. Some people are worried about conflict in the Middle East, AI boom, or whatever it is that they're worried about. There are some things out there that people are worried about, and that's led them to make kind of some more emotional decisions. I saw two separate people in the last, actually three in the last month, that had 100% of their TSP balance in the G fund and had done it semi recently for one reason or another, whatever they're afraid of, thinking the market's going to crash, thinking that they want to lock in some of their gains, whatever that looks like. And similar to the same message we would have given a few years ago when you saw more people doing this, it's really important that, especially as you're approaching retirement, you don't make decisions quite that rash without looking at your whole picture, because of the fact that the main issue with doing that, taking all your money, putting in G fund, which for non-federal employees out there is basically putting your money in cash, kind of like a money market fund, is that you also got to figure out, when do you get back in? And getting out's kind of the easy part to some extent, as far as, okay, the market's way up, all-time highs, I'm going to take some of my gains. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, the market generally continues to increase from all-time highs statistically, but you're not losing money today by locking in some gains. But the bigger problem becomes, when do you move that money back in? So again, I think as you see some of this uncertainty, things with interest rates, CPI, conflict in the Middle East, AI, whatever it is, you really need to have a strategy for what you're going to be doing with your money, whether that's TSP or outside, and not just kind of saying, okay, I'm just going to move everything to G and chase safety. So again, that's not just federal employee specific, but you tend to see it a little more with federal employees than you do with people in the private sector, because G fund, I think, feels a little better to put all your money in than it does for a normal employee to actually just have their money sitting in cash. It doesn't feel like your money's sitting in cash, but it essentially is. So
Well, and you guys work with a lot of federal employees, don't you?
we do. The areas we serve, there's a whole bunch, and I always joke that, nowadays we do training and specific workshops with federal employees, but for a long time we didn't, and they just kind of found their way to us. We weren't even necessarily looking for them, and they found our way to us. So there's a lot of things when it comes to federal benefits, but, and like I said, that doesn't just apply to federal employees,
Mhm.
but I think it's a lot more common to see a federal employee moving large amounts of money around in there, because I think of the fact that it just, talk about G or F, it feels better and it feels different than just sitting your money in a big pile of cash. But in reality, like I said, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to get to a new study that we have in front of us, and this is from Northwest Mutual. And it says that Americans now believe they need $1.46 million to retire comfortably. And that's a jump of more than 15% from last year's estimate, Graham. So, Graham, why don't you tell us, what's your reaction to the idea that it's going to take almost $1.5 million to retire comfortably?
I mean, it could for some people. I don't think I would say that it's that for everybody. I think this article is kind of similar to, I remember last year, I forget who put it out, but there was some article saying something to the effect of, the new middle class in the US is $200,000 to $300,000 a year or something like that. And in income, that is,
Ah,
that if you're making
yeah.
100K, you're 150, you're not middle class, you're kind of lower middle. And in some areas, that probably is true. I mean, if you live in San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, even, bigger southern metropolitan areas like Dallas and Austin and Houston, that might actually be the case if you're, trying to live in a nice area and take a couple vacations a year. But it's so solely dependent on what kind of lifestyle you live, where you live, and where you are in life. I think those are the really big things you have to look at. So we've sat down with people that 1.5 million wasn't enough for them to retire because of their lifestyle. So for some people, it may be more than that. But also, I've seen people retire comfortably on much, much less than that in savings as well. Again, just kind of based on their lifestyle, based on the things they do and the things they like to do and just what their habits are and where they are in life. So I think that's, you really have to take it within the context of everything else in your situation, not just the number. Cause I think people have a tendency to want to really simplify retirement into just a couple of numbers. And there are numbers you need to know, and there are some really important numbers. But if somebody just walked up to me on the street and said, "Hey, I have 1.5 million," or if they said, "I have $15 million saved for retirement, can I retire?" You can't answer that question just based on that number because, they could have 3 yachts and a
Yep.
helicopter and a boat that they have to service, and you never know. And obviously, that's a very frivolous example, and it's not most people. But I think there is just this kind of misconception that, oh, if you have a large enough number, you can't outspend that, you can't
Mhm.
out lifestyle that, and that's just not the case for some people. And then for some people, the smaller number's fine. So you really have to look at it. But I will agree with this article that the amount that the average person needs has definitely increased over the last few years as obviously inflation has increased and just the general cost of living.
Yeah. Well, it blows my mind to think that so many Americans feel like they're not gonna be ready to retire. Why is that?
I mean, I think there's a couple reasons for it. I think for one thing, and you see this in a lot of different facets of culture, I do think that there is just this herd mentality of pessimism. I guess we'll call it in culture today, where it's a lot easier to sell pessimism about the future and maybe even nihilism to a certain extent, where people just think, oh, I'll never be able to do that. That'll never happen to me. And I think to a certain extent, yes, certain things have gotten more difficult. It probably has gotten a little harder because of the cost of living and all of that to afford retirement than it was 15 years ago. That doesn't mean it's impossible. And that doesn't mean that your retirement is not going to happen until you're 70 or 75 years old. But I think that there's just this feeling that you watch the news, you get on social media, whatever it is, you're going to find somebody talking about the fact that this certain thing is so terrible and that you got to be worried about this and that and the other. And we're just, I think our philosophy at the office is we're not like all sunshine and rainbows. We'll give it to you straight, but also you don't need to over exaggerate the what ifs and the hypotheticals. And because if you do, then nobody is ever going to feel comfortable retiring if you're just always looking at the bad. So I think that's part of it. But then I think the other part of it is that people just aren't actually really planning. I think that a lot of people feel like they're planning just because they're putting money in a 401k or they know they have a pension or they know they can collect social security, but they're not really planning. They haven't really dug into the numbers. They couldn't tell you what they're going to be able to spend in retirement, how they're going to spend it. how that number changes based on the age and the amount. They just kind of know, okay, I'm putting money in. I should have X amount of dollars and I'll get some other income at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, they think if they're worried, some people could work though until they're 80, just work a little bit just for fun, the fun of it.
Yeah. So, quick thing, and I'll just not hopefully this person, I actually didn't even sit down with this person, but we met somebody who was 82, 83 years old, federal employee that was still working. And they were under the assumption that they had to get 30 years in at the government
Oh,
to retire. And they only had like 26, but they didn't know you can retire after 62 with 5 years. So if you have, anyways, and so yeah, some people are working not because they have to, because again, they haven't planned for it. And it's, they get to that point in life and it's like, oh yeah, I can't retire till I'm 86. And it's like, actually, you probably could have retired 20 years ago.
oh, speaking of working a long time, let's talk about living a long time. According to this same study, many Americans think they're going to live till they're 100. So I don't know if I think that, but and if all things go well, maybe in my 90s. But anyway, how does living longer change things? Because it does.
Yeah, it changes things a lot. How long are your parents still alive, Luann, or have they
No,
passed?
no, they
Okay.
passed away. My mother died young, and she was 70, but my dad lived to be about 86. Yeah.
Okay, so you can you have some longevity, and
Mhm.
that's my family's kind of all over the place. I had two grandparents, both grandpas live a long time, and both grandmas passed away a little earlier in life. But I think if you compare that to, do you know when your parents passed away, how old they were?
Yes, I do. Both of my grandfathers passed away early. My grandmothers, though, both lived in their 80s. Yeah.
Okay, so they had
Mhm.
some
Yeah,
longevity too,
yeah.
because what I've typically seen for a lot of people, if we talk about this, and this is the case in my family, is that typically, great grandparents or grandparents did not live super long. Maybe they made it into their somewhere between 50s and 70s. And it's incredibly common nowadays for someone's parents that are still living, if they were born typically after like 1935 or so,
Mhm.
um, that there might be one at least still alive in their 80s or even 90s. Sometimes at this point, I've seen so many people nowadays. And when I say so many, it's not like every day, but it's enough to be like, wow, that's a pattern probably once every month or a couple months, that's taking care of a parent that's nearing 100 years old, or helping, take care of a parent that's nearing 100 or sometimes even over that. So longevity has definitely increased a lot. And I do think that you have to think about that a lot more, especially if you're retiring a bit earlier. Because again, in the example I gave a minute ago of somebody who's 82, 83 and still working, you probably don't have to worry about, longevity quite so much, because the likelihood of you living another 40 years would be kind of a Guinness World Record or something at that point. But if you're retiring, I mean, there's an increasing amount of people that are part of either the FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early, or just want to get out at 55 or 57 or 60 or something like that. And when you do that, you just have to think about the fact that that could be a 40 plus year retirement, right? I mean, that's a long time. And if you're a married couple, like in the case that you just mentioned with your parents, Luann, and it was the
Mhm.
exact same thing with my grandparents. Typically, at least one of you is going to live a long time.
Right.
So even if you both don't make it to 87 or 92, there's a very, very good chance that one of you will still be alive into their late 80s or even early 90s in a lot of cases. So you have to think about that, because again, we get a ton of husbands that come in the office, husbands specifically, and they say, "Yeah, I'm not making it past 75." They're just going to push me off the Grand Canyon once I get to, 77 or whatnot. I'm not doing long-term care and I'm not making it too far. And it's like, okay, I disagree with that, but you might not. But, what about your wife? You think she's also going to be, checking out at that age? Probably not.
Mhm.
Statistically, at least one of you is going to live a long time. So if you're planning a retirement, you need to be planning for two people's longevity if you're married, and also probably planning for the longevity of the younger person, because we also see a lot of couples who there's a bit of an age gap, and that's not uncommon at all. It's very normal. So if you're 65 and retiring, but your wife is 57 or your husband's 55 or whatever, you really got to look at their time horizon. So even if you think you only got 25 to 30 years, they could easily have 40, and you got to be prepared for that longer time horizon. So it really does change the equation a little bit once you start looking at all those numbers.
So, Graham, what about Social Security? Because if you look at this study, 1 in 3 Americans doubt that Social Security will even be there for them. So, tell us what you think of that.
So when you're planning for Social Security, again, like I was talking about just a second ago, you need to be planning for a long life expectancy, especially as a married couple. And so, what I mean by that is you don't need to be planning for a break even calculation, which we see all the time. People say, yeah, I was thinking about taking it at, 62 or 63 just because I ran the numbers, and it's going to take me till I'm 78 or 79 or whatnot to break even. And my dad only lived to 76. And so I'm probably just better off to just take it. But again, you need to think about the fact that if you pass away, that's the one your spouse is going to get if you're married. And even if you're not married, there's a pretty doggone good chance once you've made it to 62 or 63, and especially 65, that you're going to make it to at least your mid to late 80s or early 90s. And again, the break even is not the only reason to look at that, but I think you do need to look at that as well. And I also think that you do need to include Social Security in a plan. I know some people, like you were saying, Luann, 1 in 3 Americans doubt that there will even be Social Security. I think you could maybe make a bigger argument for that if you're in your 30s right now to say, "Ah, yeah, will it be there in 30 years?" I don't know. Probably yes, would be my guess. Will it be different? Maybe.
Probably.
Yeah, maybe probably is the better word there. Probably in some regard. But if you're within 10 years of it right now, if you're within 5 years, if you're within the age to collect it, I would say it would be very unprecedented for that benefit to be taken away from you completely, or cut completely. So you just don't want to make a fear decision on Social Security on either the break even because you don't think you're going to live long, or I've heard people say, I'm going to take it early because I don't know if it's going to be there. And it's like, if you're 60 right now, I've heard people who are 60 say this, or even 61. It's like, okay, you're going to be eligible for it next year. So by your logic, you take it at 62, they could still, in your thinking, cut the benefits further for you. If you think all benefits are going to get cut, then you're just getting an even smaller portion of a smaller portion. So I don't really understand that logic. I don't think benefits are going to get cut either, but I don't know. I just think people make really emotional decisions about Social Security. And, I understand why you pay into it your whole life. And it feels like, I think people think of it a lot as like money that the government personally put in an account for you, and they just keep if you don't drain it, which isn't really how it works. And we want people to get their Social Security and maximize it, but like I said, you don't want to make a decision purely off of emotion or speculation. And if you do
Mhm.
it based on what you think the government's going to do or how long you think you're going to live, that is pretty much just emotion and speculation.
Right. And, I've heard you guys say control, what you can. We can't control what the government's going to do, but we'll plan around, make a plan for, anything that you can't control. I have to say, I'm excited. I got my first Social Security check. I waited until my full benefits, so my full retirement age, I should say. I'm six, so I just just 66 and 10 months. So very
Well,
excited.
congratulations.
Yeah.
What did you spend it on? Anything fun?
Nope, nothing big. Nope. I
Just the
think
light bill and the energy bill
yes,
and the
just nothing big, just, but just happy to get it.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, so like you said, I think it will be around in some way. It probably won't be the same, but, it'll be around. So make sure you plan wisely. But, we're talking about how much money it actually takes to retire comfortably. Graham, let's get into some of the popular rules of thumb. Okay. The 25 times rule, the 4% rule. Are those a good place to start?
I think that they're an okay place to just get some ballpark numbers. And we've said this on the show, plenty of times, but I think the main time I'll use the 4% rule if somebody is just trying to get a really quick number of, oh, what could I spend out of this portfolio? It's like, okay, well, if you want to get a really ballpark number, we can get that number in 5 seconds. The real number is going to be a little bit different than that. More than likely, it may be a little more, maybe a little less, depending on where you are in life and the taxation and all of that different stuff. But as a starting point, I think it's all right. I would not, again, like we talked about earlier, I wouldn't base all of your retirement spending on, the 4% rule, or think that it's a plan in any way, shape, or form. I mean, that we've had so many people come into the office and say, yeah, I'm thinking I'll just take my pension, take my social security, and maybe I'll just pull 4% off my investments and just kind of let that be that. And I think that plan is completely ignoring any types of efficiencies or tax strategies or spending habits or wherever you are in life at that point, because spending and retirement income, they change through the years. I had somebody say to me not too long ago, they came in and I was somebody that had good retirement income and he wasn't really sure exactly, no kids. You're like, I don't really know exactly what I want to do with my portfolio. So he was like, yeah, I'm thinking I'm just maybe going to just take 4% out a year, just put it back in savings. And that way I won't have to take RMDs on it. And on the surface, that sounds maybe okay to some people. It's like, okay, yeah, get some money out of the IRA, take 4%, a safe amount. But if you really dig into that idea, you're just taking money out of your tax deferred account, paying taxes on it, taking it out of investments, just leaving it in cash. And then when you get interest on that cash, paying taxes on it again. And so over time, all you're really doing is taking money out of investments and funding a big cash account that you have no goal for and get taxed on every single year. So there's better things to do with that money than to just say, I'm just going to take 4% out a year just to kind of empty it out and get my RMDs down and whatnot. So I think there's more strategy that goes into it. But if you're somebody who just wants a really quick number while you're sort of thinking through things, and that's sort of nice to have, then I don't mind it for that. I also don't think. Do you remember, Luann? Didn't the guy that invented the 4% rule revise it down a little bit recently
Yeah, he
too? It's not
did. Yeah.
percentage.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he even has agreed it doesn't work the same today.
Yeah, I think I'd have to look it up, but I think it's maybe like 3.77
Yeah,
or
that sounds
3.8
right.
or something like that.
hmm
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it may be higher than that for some people. If you're retired later in life and you have a shorter life expectancy, it may be a bit higher than that. And if you're retiring at 50 years old, I don't know that I like the 4% rule at all. If you're trying to get that money to last you, all the way into your 90s, you're taking on a lot more risk, taking out more. So again, I think there's other considerations, but as a starting point, it's maybe an okay way to just kind of get a ballpark number before you really dig into the numbers and figure out an actual strategy, not just kind of use a rule of thumb.
Would you rather pay more or less in taxes? If you want to pay more, don't do anything. If you want to pay less, talk to Cris Wallace to see what's possible for you. Just text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Again, text VISIT to 256-937-2010.
Are you a federal employee feeling pressure from the early retirement offers like VERA, VSIP, or the Deferred Resignation Program? Recent government initiatives have introduced significant changes to federal retirement programs, making employees feel pressured to consider early retirement or face potential layoffs. At WG Financial Group, we help guide federal employees through these uncertain times. Our team understands the complex federal retirement systems and can help you make informed decisions. Call 256-937-2010 to schedule your complimentary discovery session with us today. We'll help you assess your options and create a personalized retirement plan to help you feel more confident. Visit WGFinancialGroup.com or call 256-937-2010 to book your session. Firm is not affiliated with the U.S. government. Investment advisory services offered through AE Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.
Dreaming up your ideal retirement? It starts with a solid plan tailored to your unique goals. Set aside uncertainty by arranging a friendly, informative session with Cris Wallace. Just text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Begin charting your course with confidence.
As we've been talking here, the main point is retirement isn't a time to just say, I have to have this number to retire, okay? I have to have a certain amount saved or whatever. And also, you don't have to do what your neighbor does. Every single person's retirement is different. So the main thing is turn your savings into a reliable, lasting income stream. And you can get some help, some guidance on that by giving the team at WG Financial Group a call. Graham Bauer, Cris Wallace, here's the number, 256-937-2010. You can call or text the word VISIT to their number, okay? Get a complimentary discovery visit. Remember, the motto at WG Financial Group is plan, retire, and play. That's what they want for you. And that's what we always talk about on this show. So just, find us online. WGFinancialGroup.com is the website. And remember, this show is available wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, wherever. Just search for the name of our show, the Rite Retirement Show. And we're so happy to have you along with us today. I'm Luann Fulmer here with Graham Bauer. And Graham, I want to get into now something different. This is something that you guys do a lot of. We're going to talk about some tax strategies that a lot of retirees haven't heard of, and that is the QCDs. So tell us, what is a QCD?
Well, you'd be surprised how many people didn't know about some of these, but a QCD is one that we see missed a lot. It's not something that everybody listening can do today, but I do think it's something that should be on everyone's radar, especially if you are charitably inclined, which a lot of our clients tend to be, whether that's a church or an animal shelter or some other organization that they give money to. But essentially, a QCD stands for a qualified charitable distribution. And how it works very practically is after you reach age 70 and a half, you are allowed to take money out of your IRA, send it directly to a church or charity, and you do not pay taxes on it. They don't pay taxes on it. You still report it on your taxes, but it's a non-taxable donation. So it's something that we highly, highly recommend people do once they're eligible, if they're charitably inclined, because it also counts towards your required minimum distribution. So once you get to 73 or 75, you can give some of your RMD through it. And it's a reduction to your adjusted gross income, which we'll talk more about, but is very helpful, especially in retirement, because when you're working, there's a lot of ways to reduce your adjusted gross income. When you're retired, it gets a little bit harder to do that. So QCDs are a great tool. Again, there's something that we highly encourage people to do. And we encourage people to do it before they get to RMDs too. There's a lot of people who say, well, yeah, I mean, if you're already doing the giving, I'll give an example, and I'll probably give a couple examples as we go along. But this was an actual conversation I had with somebody. They were we were talking about, this actually wasn't a client, just someone I know. Sometimes when you're working this industry, people just tell you things about when they know what you do. They're like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I don't know if people are looking for validation or what, but they're saying we're taking X amount of dollars out of retirement accounts per year, and we're on Social Security, and that's about it. And sometimes I'll give people a little tip. I'm not their financial advisor, but things like this, you don't really have to be. And just say, oh, well, you guys should look at doing QCDs if you're doing charitable giving, because you're old enough, I think, to do that now. And they're kind of like, oh, well, what's the benefit of doing that? And the real benefit in their case is the fact that, they're taking money out of an IRA every single month, and then they're giving money out of their bank account to their church. And they don't have to take RMDs. They're just taking some money for income. But when they take that money out today, they get taxed on that, and then they turn around and give that money back to their church, and they don't get any charitable deduction because they're not giving enough to get over the standard, where by giving through QCD, they are getting a deduction because that money doesn't get taxed. So there's a lot of benefits to doing it. And I wouldn't necessarily just wait till you get to RMDs to do it. But it is something you want to be aware of because each year, if you're not doing it, it's taxable money that can be given tax free that you're kind of giving up the ability to do.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, Graham, tell us about the adjusted gross income then. Why does that reduction matter so much?
So your adjusted gross income is one of the most important numbers to know on a tax return because there are so many different things that are based on how high or low your adjusted gross income is. While you're working, there are things like Roth IRA contributions and things like that that are tied to your adjusted gross income. There's, NIT taxes and different things like that. And when you're retired, one of the biggest things that's tied to your technically modified adjusted gross income is IRMA. So your Medicare increases based on your income. So if you can reduce your adjusted gross income, you reduce the potential for you to pay increased Medicare premiums. So again, if you're given money, it's very practically, if you're giving money from your bank account to a church and you take a itemized deduction for that, that does not reduce your adjusted gross income. It reduces your taxable income. So you could give $1 million to a charity and still pay increased IRMA premiums because that's not a deduction to get to your adjusted gross income, even though you didn't pay a whole lot in taxes because you gave a bunch of money away. So a reduction to your AGI is basically the best tax reduction tool you could have. And when you're working, you have different ways. Like I said a minute ago, you have your 401k, you have maybe a traditional IRA, you have a health savings account. There are different ways to do that. But when you're retired, your options are really slim. So wherever you can get those reductions, it's important to do so.
Now, give us a concrete example then of what this whole difference looks like, please.
So let's just say that there's a retired couple that has $80,000 of income and they have to take a $50,000 required minimum distribution. And they were going to give, let's say they were going to give $50,000 to charity anyways. I know that's a lot of money to
Yeah.
give to charity, just for example's sake. So if they didn't do a qualified charitable distribution and they took the 50,000 as income, plus their other 80,000 of income that they have, their adjusted gross income would be $130,000. And then from there, they could give $50,000 to charity and they'll get a deduction, but it doesn't reduce their AGI. So, in this case, they're still under the IRMA limits. If it's a single person, they're going to be slightly over the IRMA limit and have to pay an increased Medicare premium, increased Social Security taxes because of that. Versus if instead they said, okay, we're going to give 50,000 a charity anyways, they take that 50 and they give it directly to charity. Well, they still took 150,000 or 130,000 between their income and between out of their retirement accounts, but their AGI, their adjusted gross, will only be $80,000 because that 50,000 that they gave via QCD never factors in. So they save money on their Social Security taxes. They save money on increased Medicare premiums that they may have had to pay. So it makes a big difference. And like I said, it's really one of the only levers. There's a few, but the levers you can pull are kind of slim once you get to retirement. So it's just a really important thing to be aware of.
Right. Interesting. So, who is this strategy then best suited for?
Well, obviously you got to be over 70 and a half, right? So
Yeah.
that's the biggest prerequisite. I know people sometimes when they hear about QCDs get disappointed when they're 63 and I'm like, "Hey, well, it gives you something to look forward
Yeah.
to with age." You know, it's not quite as exciting maybe as getting your driver's license or
Mm.
becoming an adult, but it's, hey, you're QCD age now. So you got to be over 70 and a half. It obviously makes the most sense if you're already giving money to church or charity, or if you plan to do it in the future. So some people aren't doing it today, but once they know that's an option and they say, hey, maybe I was going to give a couple $1,000 here and there. I tell folks even that don't regularly give if they're past 70 and a half. I always say, hey, if you ever even just so much as decide to give $1,000 to St. Jude just on a whim, let us know. And we can just do that through a QCD because you might as well. And it also helps out if you're, sensitive to the adjusted gross income thresholds, whether that's the IRMA brackets, you're getting close to those, or Social Security taxation. tax bracket creep. There's like there's a couple of different things, but that's who it really makes the most sense for. And I wouldn't say you have to be a massive giver to do this. For example, if you're giving $2,000 a year, I think it's worth doing it. Now, if you're giving, some people will be like, yeah, we give, $100 here and there. That may not make a large impact, to be honest. You almost might as well just do some cash. In
Hmm.
that case, you still can, but it's going to be very minimal. But if you're giving, even just a little bit, $1,000, couple $1,000 a year, it still makes sense to do this because it's not that hard to do. And charities, churches, they don't care. They get the check either way. It's not a big deal to them. And it kind of gives you a little more of a benefit for giving.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so I have a question for you. You're talking about this, but how many other advisors are proactively bringing this to their clients?
I think that a lot of advisors do know about it. What I have noticed is that I think some advisors may not be pushing people enough towards doing it. I think there are certain things that maybe discussions are being had on, but then they don't happen. We'll have people come in and they'll say, "Yeah, I kind of know somebody mentioned that to me. I kind of knew that was an option, but I'm just not doing it quite yet." And my reaction is always just, why? Why not? I mean, why are you not doing it? And it usually comes down to either A, maybe the client not fully understanding what it is and how it works and feeling comfortable doing it. And two, just the fact that people don't always do the things they're supposed to do unless somebody kind of nudges them and
Hmm.
says, "Hey, we really need to start doing this. Hey, we really need to start doing this." I know myself personally, sometimes people got to tell me, not in my work, but in my personal life, two or three times before I remember to do something that I had to do. So I think the education part is very important, and we want to make sure everybody that we talk to knows about these types of things that are opportunities. But then I also think, like I said, the just intentionality of getting people to take action is also the big thing. To not just know what they're supposed to do, but to say, "This is what you should do. This is what we recommend you do, and how can we take steps to make sure it gets done so we're not missing these opportunities."
Very good. I want to take this time to make sure we give out our phone number, Graham, because if you have any questions about what Graham's talking about, if you want to look at your own situation and check out QCDs for yourself, then you can certainly give us a call and, gosh, set up an appointment, go in and see them. It's a complimentary visit, guys. Definitely take advantage of this. 256-937-2010. You can call or you can text the word visit. All right. Also, check us out at wgfinancialgroup.com. And thank you so much for spending part of your weekend with us. I'm Lou Ann Fulmer here today with Graham Bauer, and this is the Rite Retirement Show. So, Graham, all right, let's shift to another strategy. I know you're passionate about this one. And this is something specifically for people who spent their careers at a company that offered company stock inside their retirement plan. So tell us, what is net unrealized appreciation and why does it matter?
So, net unrealized appreciation, or I'm going to refer to it as NUA most of the time. So I'm not save myself some words.
Getting tongue tied.
Exactly. Save myself a little breath. That's kind of the slang or acronym or whatnot for it. Uh, it's more common than you would think. It is a bit niche. It's not something that every single person that, uh, you know, comes into the office has an opportunity to do. But a lot of people do work for very large companies, and it's increasingly common at very large corporations. So, I mean, if you work for you're an engineer for a large military contractor, or, you work in management for a fast food chain or a grocery store chain or any kind of company that is a large publicly traded company, it may be an option in your 401k. So, essentially, how it works and what you're looking for. So if you're somebody out there right now thinking, is this an opportunity for me? You need to answer a couple of questions. First of all, do you work for a company that's publicly traded? And so that's a really big thing. So I know some people work for, there are big companies out there that aren't publicly traded. One that comes to mind, and I don't know if I can always forget if I can say company names or not on here, but the Green grocery store
Okay.
that they have everywhere, especially Florida. They're
Yeah.
not publicly traded. They have a great employee stock program, but
Oh.
it's not an opportunity for those kind of people working at companies like that. But if you work at, their arch rival store, the Blue grocery store that's everywhere down here, this is an opportunity specifically that we've, helped people with that do work there before. So it has to be a publicly traded company for one thing. And then the second main thing is that you have to have that company's stock inside of your 401k. So, if you hypothetically, if WG Financial Group was a publicly traded company, I would have to own shares of WG inside of my 401k with WG. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is you want to have purchased those shares at a much lower value than they're at today. So if you started buying company stock, 5 weeks ago and the price is down 50% and you're about to retire, you don't really need to worry about this too much. It's not going to be advantageous for you. But what we do see a lot is somebody worked for a company, a government contractor, something like that for a long time. They've been there 30 years, 40 years, and they were buying in the 90s or the early 2000s at really, really low prices into the company stock. And then today, it's appreciated a lot. And so they have a lot of gains in those stocks. So what NUA allows you to do is a very simple explanation is it allows you to specifically take those shares out of your 401k and roll them into an after-tax brokerage account instead of an IRA. So as we know, if you have a 401k and you roll it over to an IRA, it's not taxable when you roll it over, but any money you take out of the IRA after that is taxable, fully taxable. 100% of it is taxed at your ordinary income tax rates. Money in a brokerage account, an after-tax account, is only taxed on the gains that you take out. And it's taxed at capital gains rates, which the top rate is 20% versus top rate of 37% on ordinary income. So you're being taxed at lower rates and only on the gains, not what you paid in. So again, kind of running over what you would need. You need a publicly traded company that you probably worked for a long time, company stock inside the 401k, low basis. That's kind of what you're looking for. And if that is your situation, you really need to run the numbers with somebody with, ideally a certified financial planner, someone that does tax planning to make sure that you're making the right decision. Because as we'll talk about in a second, if you do this wrong, it either costs you a lot in taxes or you could give up the opportunity altogether.
So why don't you? That's a lot there. Why don't you walk us through just a real world example of what that difference looks like in dollars, Graham?
Sure. So let's just say somebody has a 401k plan and they have $500,000 in there. And let's say that all of that is in their company stock, which
Mhm.
I've seen a handful of times. So they got 500,000 in their 401k. It's all company stock.
'Kay.
What they paid for those shares, let's say $50,000. So they paid $50,000 over their career and 450,000 is just the stock appreciation. So when they retire, they're going to have two options. One, they could take that 500 grand and they could roll it into an IRA. They don't pay any taxes to do that. But then when they withdraw from that IRA, the $500,000 over time, they're taxed on that at ordinary income tax rates. So let's say a 22% tax rate on 500 grand, maybe they pay 110 grand in taxes on that 500K
Okay.
over their lifetime. So they roll it 401k to IRA. So that's the first option. That's the
Mhm.
very simple option. But in this case specifically, that's not at all what we would recommend somebody do. The second option is the NUA rollover. So in this case, what you do is you roll that whole 500 grand not to an IRA, but to an after-tax brokerage account because it's a publicly traded company. You're an employee of that company. The stock's in your 401k. You're allowed to do that. Now, the cost of doing that, unlike the IRA rollover, there is some taxes today. So you don't defer all the taxes like you do on an IRA rollover, but you only pay ordinary income tax on your cost basis. So what you paid. So if you remember from earlier, they paid $50,000
Mhm.
for the stock. It's now worth 500. They're only going to pay ordinary income tax on the $50,000.
Okay.
So again, whatever that ends up being, a little over $10,000, maybe something like that, that they pay today, this year on that stock. The whole amount then is in a brokerage account, the 500 grand, and that other 450K is taxed at long-term capital gains rates, which they'll probably be anywhere from the 0 to the 15%. Most people aren't in the 20. So taxes on that would probably be around $60 to $70,000. So just doing a different type of rollover, the NUA versus just a normal rollover, could have saved this person $40,000, $50,000, maybe a lot more if they're in the 0% capital gains bracket. I've seen it where they don't pay anything on their capital gains. So there's probably potential to $40 to $70,000 of tax savings just in that rollover alone.
Wow. Okay. And then you said this opportunity can be lost forever. How's that?
The main way that it can be lost forever is if you just don't know about it and you
Mhm.
roll your 401k over before you've heard anything about it. So if you retired, and sadly, we've a handful of times have seen this happen where somebody didn't know any better and they retired and they said, okay, and I'm just going to roll over my 401k to an IRA. I'm retired. And they did it. And then they came to us and they're like, I already rolled over my IRA. And yeah, the opportunity's gone at that point. Once it
Oh.
leaves the 401k, the opportunity is completely gone at that point. So again, most custodians will kind of try to save you from yourself. In my experience, that when you do the rollover, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, you have this opportunity. Did you want to do that? But I think for a lot of people, especially if they're not working with, an advisor with a certified financial planner, they don't even know what that opportunity is. So even if someone on the phone is at a call center is saying, "Hey, do you want to do this?" They're like, "Ah, yeah, I don't really understand this," and they just roll it over.
Right.
So it's something that you really need to consider because again, if that situation applies to you, even if you only have like $50,000 or $20,000 in company stock, you should still look at it because it may make sense. Last year I remember specifically rolled over a 401k for somebody and they had a cost basis of like 1,500 bucks and it was like $50,000 of stock. And it's like that's not, it wasn't their whole 401k, but it was enough that if they had just rolled it over without looking at that, they would have given up probably, I don't know, 10 grand or maybe a little more in tax savings. So you just want to know your options before you make those big decisions and make sure that you've looked at the numbers and seen if it's right for you or not.
Mhm. Yeah, so what are the requirements to qualify, if any?
So again, the big ones, like I mentioned before, is it's got to be 401k plan from the company. They got to be publicly traded. You do have to usually be separated from service or past age 59 and a half. Most people don't do this while they're still working just because of the fact that there is a decent bit of taxes associated with it in a lot of cases because you pay some taxes up front. So typically it's something that's done post retirement. One of the most important rules is the entire account must be distributed by the end of the year. So, even the amount that's not going over as an NUA rollover still has to get distributed by the end of the year. So if you tried to just roll part of your 401k and do an NUA rollover, and then you didn't distribute the rest of it by December 31st, you're going to get taxed ordinary income on the entire amount that you rolled out. So it's really important that you make sure if you do this kind of rollover, you're closing out that 401k. You're not going to leave a little money behind for later. It's like that account is gone at this point. You moved it into a couple other accounts. And then you just have to remember that you're going to owe ordinary income tax on the cost basis. Typically, they don't withhold for these kind of rollovers. So what I mean by that is you pay 20,000 in taxes, or say you owe 20,000 in taxes from this kind of rollover. Usually you'll have to come up with that money from another account or sell some stock to pay the taxes next year, or adjust withholdings or whatever it looks like. There's different avenues of doing that, but you have to do kind of all of those things to make sure that you're being compliant, that you're doing it correctly, and there's no nothing missed there because, like I said, it's not a simple, it's not a simple kind of rollover. You really need to make sure you know what you're doing, and
Yeah.
not one that I typically advise people just go out on their own and do.
Yeah, sounds like it. Now, are there situations where the NUA doesn't make sense?
Yeah, there definitely are. I mean, I would say the main couple are one, obviously, if the cost basis is high. So, or like I've seen it before where they're holding shares at a loss. So, I mean, if you didn't make any money on the stock or you didn't make much, like let's say you paid in 80,000 and it's worth 90, are you really going to pay ordinary income on 80 grand today to save a little bit of taxes on 10 grand? Probably not. That doesn't really make any sense. And in those cases, you'll probably just do a normal rollover. So, there's different rules of thumb. We usually say basis has got to be maybe 50% or less, but it's dependent on the situation and what other things you have going on. And then I think the only other real drawback to doing it, or I guess I'd give two more. One is you are going to be a lot of times pretty heavily concentrated in one position. So the benefit of like an IRA rollover is you can buy and sell inside an IRA with no gains. So if you had, Apple stock that you made 500K on in gains, you can sell that in an IRA, not pay any capital gains. So you're not really stuck in that position. You can roll it over, reinvest it, diversify, all that good stuff. Where if you do the NUA, you're going to have capital gains on selling any of that stock in the future. So what it leads to is, some people end up getting these really concentrated stock positions because because they just don't want to sell it for the gains. And then the only other drawback that I would say, as we're kind of wrapping it up here in a minute, Luann, is that you do give up the ability to have that step up in basis at death. So typically, I buy Apple stock for $10, it appreciates to $50, and my kids inherit that. Their basis jumps up to $50. They get a full step up in basis. They don't have to pay any of my gains. NUA disqualifies you from that step up. So your kids will not get a full step up on basis of the stock that came over through an NUA rollover. So that's also a little bit of a disadvantage as well. So you really want to look at kind of all avenues before you figure out, is it right for you? Not only do the numbers make sense, but does it kind of align with your goals and with your risk tolerance for maybe having to hold a concentrated position for a longer period of time? But it is one of those things that, when you can help somebody with that didn't know about it, it really can be a massive, massive tax savings. So I know we're wrapping up the show, Luann. I appreciate you
Great
being here.
information, though, Graham. This is really good stuff.
Yeah, and we maybe we'll get to. There was a couple other things that we didn't
Yeah.
get to today that maybe we'll be able to get to next week. I think Chris should be back as well, but it's always great to be doing the show with you. So if you guys are listening and want to give us a call, the number is 256-937-2010 and 256-937-2010. You can give us a call or text the word visit. I hope everybody has an awesome and blessed week. Remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Please remember, converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. An increase in taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.
Graham Bauer holds the enrolled agent designation, but is not currently offering tax preparation services. Neither the firm nor its agents may give tax advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any purchasing decisions.
Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisory requirements. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. WG Financial is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial. This radio show is a paid placement.